This is Stacia, and today we're going to look at the main line of the Italian game. If you're like me, you might be like, I wonder what the main line is. Well, we're going to see it today. So we're basically going to look at the most popular moves played in the Italian opening, and we'll go until 10 moves or until development is complete. So let's go ahead and get started. The Italian game comes from pawn to e4, pawn to e5, and knight to c3. This helps develop the white king side, and it attacks a pawn, which is currently unprotected. So black responds with knight c6, which does protect the pawn, and bishop to c4 now puts the bishop on the best diagonal, which is aimed right at the weak f7 pawn on the black side. Okay, now there's two main moves from here. There's knight to f6 and bishop to c5. Bishop c5 is actually the main move. If knight to f6, you can play this knight g5 idea attacking f7. But in this other line, you play c3 in the main line. So c3, I think, is a very interesting move because this does prepare d4, but it does some other things too. Like, for example, it helps the move b4 as well. Sometimes we can try to trap this bishop. I may show a line like that later in the video. And also, in addition to that, even though we're taking away the best square from the knight, we are actually helping our bishop on c4. Like, for example, if black were to try and attack our bishop, saying that they want to get the bishop pair, okay, here it probably doesn't matter too much. We could always go back to e2 or something. But the main idea is that if you can't go this way, we have the option to go this way. And let's say black really wants to get our bishop, and they're really trying. You can see that the pawn moved up to c3 gave our bishop a little hidey hole on c2, and now we're actually threatening a fork. So this is one of the ideas as well. And there's even more, but we'll stop with that. So knight f6 is now the main move that black plays. This is the most logical move, in my opinion. Now black is one move away from castling, and this comes with tempo on the pawn, which normally white would want to play knight c3 to protect that. That would develop a piece, but we don't have that available. So although I personally here would play the move d4, which is a counterattack, in the main line, they play d3. So this is kind of a concession because white would love to get d4 in one move, but we're also not exactly ready for that. Usually you do a pawn break when you have better development than your opponent. But if we look at the development, black's actually the one that has 3 pieces out, and we have just 2. So I think that that's basically one big reason why d4 doesn't work as well as it usually does. But it is fine. It is a move. d3 is saying we're not going to play d4 in one move. We'll play it later when we feel like it. But in the meantime, we have enough room to maneuver our pieces. So we're accepting a more closed position now. So that means that tempos are less important and maneuvering is more possible. Okay, so let's continue with the main line. Black plays the move d6, not wanting to commit to castling just yet, but this is a good move that opens up the bishop, and it actually does mean that the bishop may try to create the pin at some point. All right, and now white castles. Okay, so when I teach beginners, I definitely say you got to watch out for this pin. This can be a very deadly pin, but I have something to share with you. The move c3 actually helped with this pin a great deal. The reason this pin was so deadly is because the bishop pinning the knight in conjunction with this move, knight d4. If you're not ready for that and you don't see it coming, you can get crushed by that, right? Attack the pinned piece. As you can see, the move c3 has restricted that knight, so that isn't possible. So we actually aren't afraid of this pin. In fact, you know, we could kick this bishop away. We're certainly not afraid of them taking our knight. Now we have the bishop pair and our queen is better placed. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. And if they go bishop h5, now the bishop is off this diagonal, which it's usually better placed on. And we don't need to go g4 necessarily, but I'm not worried about this pin. We even have the knight coming here to give protection to that knight to free up our queen to move elsewhere. So this is totally fine. And if the bishop ends up on g6, it's actually not well placed there at all, right? It's just aiming at a brick wall. So yeah, we're not afraid of the pin here at all. So castles is played. And now black plays the move a6. So you might be thinking, especially if you're a beginner, why play this move? It has a couple ideas, actually. So one idea is to play b5, potentially attacking the bishop, but I don't think that's the main idea. As someone that plays this move with black myself, the main idea here is that we want a hidey hole for the bishop. So it's prophylaxis because when d4 does come, or b4, we want to be able to pull our bishop all the way back to a7. And once the bishop's on a7, it's very well placed there. It just serves as a sniper in the bushes. And it also pins the f-pawn. And white, you know, if they're a club player or a lower rated player, sometimes they forget about this pin. I've had many wins just based on the fact that they forgot about my bishop on a7. But even the super grandmasters play this move, so you know that it's a good move. Okay, and white responds here with the move that I wouldn't play myself, so I'm more fascinated. The move a4. Now, my understanding of this move is that it makes b4 more potent because they can follow up with a5 and fix the black pawn structure. That's definitely one idea. It just gains space in general. That's another idea. And normally when you play a4, you do have to worry about your b4 square. But as we can see here, we do not need to be concerned, right? The pawn on c3, once again, is serving another role. So a4 is more possible because of the pawn on c3. So multi-useful move. Okay, but a4 is quite good, and it just gains space. We might even put our knight here. Sometimes they do that. Okay, but now bishop a7, prophylaxis against d4. It's not even necessary because I did check this with the engine. The engine doesn't feel that it matters that much if white plays d4. But I think grandmasters and chess players in general, they just feel that the bishop is better here. It also frees up potential c pawn pushes later. So it's just a good move to get out of the way while the position is closed. So, okay, now white's main move looks a little weird to my eye, but it is totally normal. It's the move rook to e1. So you might be thinking that you want to play for f4 in this position, but it's actually not true. f4 is actually a little harder to get in. Number one, because your pawn is pinned, so it's going to take more time. But number two, because your d3 pawn is backwards and weak. So that means it's way more of a priority to push the pawn to d4. The problem with pushing that pawn to d4 is that you unprotect the e4 pawn, so it could then be captured by this knight on f6. So rook e1, if you think that you're going to go f4, rook e1 looks weird because you're taking your rook off the f-file, but it does serve to protect the pawn, and it does something else too. It frees up the f1 square because guess what? this knight's not coming to c3. This knight is going to come to f1 and go on a journey, and often the knight can get into the beautiful and wonderful f5 square. So, okay, let's continue our journey. So bishop a7, rook e1. And now I did notice something when I was preparing this video for you guys, and that's that often when a move is made in chess, it's a really good idea to ask, what does that move do? And that's when I realized, yeah, it protects the pawn. But what did it leave behind? Well, when a rook moves to e1 like this, it does leave behind the f2 pawn. And as you can see, that pawn is currently pinned. So they're actually, there are some ideas that you need to watch out for. Like, for example, what if black played knight g4? As you can see, I was looking at this. I've played this move in a game because, hey, why not? We might win f2. But, okay, white can play rook e2. But you could argue that the rook is a little bit misplaced on e2. Why is it there? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, and then let's say black just continues because I don't really know what you do from here. There's no way to continue the attack, and then it just h3 and knight f6. And there were some games in the database where masters just simply put the rook back on e1 now. Threat neutralized. So that is just something to be aware of, to watch out for that idea of knight g4. And as you'll see, it's even worse coming up. The other thing is the pin, but once again, we do not need to worry about the pin. There's no knight d4. And there's also this move that will safeguard the knight. And after h3, the best the bishop could do is simply go back. And h3 could be a useful move, so it's actually not recommended that you worry about the pin here. Okay. So black castles. Black is not worried about knight g5. Well, knight g5 is nothing at the moment, but black's not worried about the pin either. Why aren't they worried? Let's see for a second. So if I use the engine, they're not worried about the pin because, oh, well, it's pretty clear. There's no knight on c3. If there was a knight on c3, they should be worried. And since there isn't, that pin is nothing. So that's basically what's going on there. So, okay, castles. And now white plays h3. And yeah, so I just got done saying that knight g4 and bishop g4 are not a problem. So why would white play such a silly move, h3? Well, the answer is actually kind of surprising. The answer is knight g4 is a threat. So let's say white does something random. Let's go continue our plan with knight b to d2. Well, guess what? Now knight g4 actually is a threat, and for a surprising reason. Okay, if they go here, and we simply go rook e2, just like before, right? We're going to go h3 next. Now, black plays king h8, which looks very mysterious. And then if we play h3 to get the knight out, they play f5. And I checked the database, and this has been played, and Stockfish recommends it, so people are on to this one. This is actually playing against the pinned pawn, because now you can take that knight if you want to, but we're going to take here, and now this knight doesn't have a lot of squares. If you go knight h2, there's actually g3 that's attacking the pinned pawn and the knight. And if the knight goes to e1, which looks reasonable, black is now going to get an attack, starting with queen h4. You're still in this pin, and there's problems. So you don't want to go into this. Black is actually better here. So you'll have to watch out for this idea. That is basically why I determined that white plays h3 to stop this knight g4 thing. All right, but if we follow the main line from here, now black plays copycat and plays h6. Yeah, maybe they don't want to allow the pin. It is possible. And then white plays knight b to d2. So continuing with the knight journey that I mentioned, knight f1, knight g3, knight f5 is really what we want. We can also pair that with knight h4, which will protect the knight on f5. And then if you imagine a queen coming to f3, this is basically a nice way to get an attack on the black king side. So, okay, black now needs to execute their own idea. And no surprise, they copy white's idea with rook to e8. Same idea as white. They are protecting this pawn so they can try to go d5. d5 would be nice, and once again, that would be a tempo on the white bishop this time. Now, to my surprise, this is not the move I would play, but the main line is b4. So I think the idea is to go b5, but also just gain space in general. Another idea is to go, Another idea is to go a5 and fix the pawn structure. So both of those are ideas. So like, for example, let's say that black does a nothing move. I don't really know what to put. Maybe here. If b5, though, you have to be very careful when you're white, because if you take back with a pawn, you will lose the game because there's a discovery. Bishop check, take, and you're going to lose your rook. Please don't forget that your rook is unprotected on a1, so you can't do that. You have to take back with a bishop. Okay, so this is possible, though. And, okay. Now, in the main line after b4, black plays bishop to e6. And we're still following a game played by the great Magnus Carlsen himself. So Magnus Carlsen has played this exact way. Okay, now bishop e6. It does look annoying. It's seeking to trade our bishop on c4, a very powerful piece that was pinning the pawn. So actually, in our main line, we actually do go ahead and just simply take. And now, because the rook has come to e8, actually the rook can capture. This looks a little strange to me sometimes too, but it's really not. It's a common idea because this rook could become useful if black decides to attack the white king side. So rook takes e6. The problem with taking with a pawn is that, well, a couple minor things, honestly. Super GMs are worried about their pawn on e6. It's a backwards pawn and it's a target. Super GMs don't like that. I find that taking on this weakness and as a club player, it's not such a big deal. And usually we have more than enough counterplay down the F file. But here I don't like it quite as much because we have committed the rook to the E file, and now the rook wishes it was back on the F file, so we're kind of wasting turns. So I actually approve of this move. Rook takes E6, but who am I to question Magnus Carlsen? No one. Okay, and now white decides to play Queen C2. Now this move also looks a little weird, but it's possible because the knight on c6 is restricted. We don't have to worry about tempo moves on our queen. That's not happening, right? And another reason that this move is played is it does sort of protect e4, and it kind of just goes with the whole d4 plan. And like if d4 were to happen and black takes, you can imagine that this pawn will move up and the queen will be well placed on the This is what I call the Greek gift diagonal, because that's where we do our Greek gifts. Okay, so, yeah, and, well, why aren't we playing d4? Because I said a long time ago we wanted to play d4. Well, we're not ready yet. This knight is not where he needs to be. d4 actually does not have enough on it. So we're threatening a pawn fork, which looks kind of appealing, but black can simply take. We take back, and look, we only have this protecting it, so we just lose the pawn, basically. If we follow through with the trades, our rook is attacked. I don't think this is going to end well for us, so let's not do it. So queen c2, and now black plays queen d7. They're looking to bring their other rook into the game. They're also maybe keeping an eye on b5 and also maybe f7, but it's really just getting out of the way of the rook. Okay, and we're almost done, so I won't spend too much time on these next moves. It's unlikely you'll see this far in the main line, but let's look at some ideas. So knight to f1, continuing with the plan, and now in the main line, it's kind of surprising to me that black is the one that gets their pawn break first. They get to play d5. So I don't think we should take this, because after takes and knight takes, really not sure what we've gained from this. We still have this weak pawn on d3, and actually c3 is getting loose as well, and our pawn's still pinned. This looks a little bit iffy. Let's check out the engine. Yeah, I mean, I guess white has the tiniest of edges, but it's really just equal. So instead of that, in the main line, they play bishop to e3. Yeah, and this is a common idea because, okay, the bishop can be useful with sacrificing on h6 during an attack, but the bishop can also neutralize the sniper on a7, and especially when your rook's on e1 and your knight's on f1, bishop e3 is much stronger, because now, if black were to take, which they do in the main line, notice that it's not ideal to allow your rook to be drawn to a7, although sometimes it's okay. Takes. Now we have a pleasant choice. We can take with a rook, or we can take with a knight. So in the main line, they actually take with the knight. So this is already aiming to get into the f5 square. And we'll play one last move, and that's knight e7 black plays. So my best guess, because I play this move myself, is that black is interested in moving their c-pawn, maybe c6 or maybe c5, probably c5, but it doesn't look ready yet. And the other idea behind this move is to guard f5 and possibly come to g6 and guard e5. So both of these are potential options. This is a much better place for the knight to be. Remember how the knight is restricted by the c-pawn. So if the knight's not well placed here, let's improve our worst placed piece. Well, actually, this could be worse. But improving the knight is a good move. And so that concludes our main line of the Italian opening. Both sides are developed, and I think we can be pretty satisfied with this. I hope so. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back with more chess. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.